Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Garth, Chief Strategy Officer at Majesco, and you're listening to the Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast series. Follow along as I interview the best and brightest leaders in the insurance industry and insurtech landscape to bring you the latest in digital transformation, innovation, industry trends, challenges, and opportunities, as well as next-gen technologies. We use our experience to anticipate what's next without losing sight of what's now. Stay tuned to find out your next now. Good day, everybody, and welcome to the Future of Insurance podcast. And I am thrilled today to have Jim MacMillan. A lot of people should know Jim. He's been in different roles throughout the industry. He's now the CIO at Vantage. We're really thrilled to have you join us, Jim. Welcome.
Well, thanks for inviting me and having me. I'm really excited to talk about where we are in terms of technology in the insurance industry, as well as where we could be going.
Absolutely. There's a lot of change happening. So what I always like to do, Jim, is I like to start off with you giving your background and your role at Vantage Risk and our partnership, because while it's a small community, I find that some people that don't know everybody, which I kind of find it hard to believe that nobody's going to know Jim MacMillan. But why don't we go ahead, Jim?
I am the Chief Information Officer for Vantage, Vantage Risk. We are a Bermudian-based P&C and reinsurance carrier. My role is basically I head up of all application development, infrastructure, security for the organization. I work with our various business leaders, as well as the leadership teams, to set the priorities in terms of where are we going as an organization from a technology perspective, as well as how do we support their business processes and their goals. And then we work to measure that over time.
Awesome. Let's talk about transformation versus building from the ground up. You've done both during your career. What are the differences, the challenges, and the opportunities for each?
They're very different, but there are very much similarities. In a transformation, one of the big things is you already have a corporate culture. So with a corporate culture, you can work with that corporate culture to figure out how to improve it. And then basically you have a series of folks that are already known entities in the organization, and you can leverage their strengths. You can also look at the organization where there's opportunities and then see where you can find other folks either within the organization or potentially add folks to the resources to the organization going forward. In addition, you already know where your strengths and your weaknesses are in terms of your technology stacks, your security, your infrastructure, so you can set the roadmaps going forward. The distinct difference in when you're building from the ground up, number one, you got to create a culture. What will that culture be? And I look at the culture being three things, three key areas of what I look as of highly performant organizations is teams need to be transparent. The organization needs to be very transparent. The team needs to be empowered. So every team member needs to be empowered to do what they're supposed to do. And the third need to be, they all have to have a can-do attitude. And then basically by building those folks or hiring those folks into that, they start fitting into that corporate culture. Now, the difference when you're building from the ground up is everyone comes in with a predisposed thought of what to bring from their old organization. So you got to be careful to ensure that what are we building as an organization? Where do we think we want to go, and constantly changing that? So there are opportunities. Also, in terms of building from the ground up, you have the opportunity to hopefully not repeat what you're coming from, i.e. technical debt. So are you doing build versus buy? Where do you do build versus buy? How do you plan these out? How do you interact with the business units? There are similarities, but there are also many differences. And I would say, everyone says, oh, it's great to do a startup to build it from the ground up. But there are different types of struggles, right? There's different types of challenges. And I think what we've done here at Vantage is we've done a really good job with the leadership that we've been able to bring in, looking at how we want to build our organization, what is our corporate culture, which are really around those three areas I just mentioned: transformation, can-do attitude, and empowerment. What do we want to use as our tech stacks, our build versus buy strategy?
So when you were building Vantage Risk from the ground up, you took a view into the various areas to determine buy versus build. And it's not always a black and white answer, but it's really kind of tied to what it is that you as an organization really want to do and where you really want to be able to kind of compete. So kind of describe your strategy and approach, and what were the business drivers and decisions, that for others that are really kind of looking at this buy versus build, what kind of guidance is there?
I think when you're looking at what I would call your operational, your business processes, your underwritings and your claims areas, your transactional processing, that's where you really look at, we're going to go buy a solution, right? And evaluate which solution you feel is the best, and then partner with that organization, with the vendor, which is a software company, as well as ensure that you have a really good SI that you're going to partner on. So you got to have a triad of partnership in that area. Also, in terms of when you're buying something, you really want to make sure you're going to keep it within the box, right? So we try very hard to keep our solutions 95% within the box, that we're not creating a lot of issues going forward when we want to upgrade our platforms, because our upgrades are relatively seamless here at Vantage. When we look at building something, we're looking at something where we want to do something very different in terms of workflow, something very different in terms of data capture, analytics, how we want to be able to interact with our UI, those and provide those types of workflows and efficiencies to our underwriters or UAs, our claims professionals, and our operations teams. In those cases, we then say we will probably then be able to build these platforms using cloud native stacks, and then we would integrate through APIs. So, and really, our goal is not to build point to point APIs. We actually built our own digital platform that actually acts as I would call it, in the old school, we call it a data hub, but it's really a microservices architecture that we
Yep.
build it once, it can be used by many.
So you kind of have that advantage, as you kind of said earlier, the advantages and challenges that you don't have this legacy debt from a technology standpoint, but it also opens up the opportunity for you to really kind of define what are going to be your technology requirements and drivers, because what you have from that perspective and how you select will have a longer term impact going forward. So it's kind of like, yeah, you want to kind of focus on today, but you also want to take into consideration what's going to be kind of coming down the road. So what were some of those technology requirements and drivers for somebody who's thinking about starting from scratch?
Yeah, I think, most leaders in the technology area are really coming from a standpoint of data, right?
Yeah.
How can we collect as much data and make it as efficient as possible? And not that every system is going to be passing data downstream. The only parts of that data where applicable. So basically, what is your data strategy? So you have your front end platforms, which are really critical to the operational perspective, but the analytical pieces of, okay, we're going to build ourselves a data repository, or in the old classic sense, an enterprise data warehouse, an EDW. But make that EDW more of a financial or a very smart EDW that you can answer financial questions and more high level management questions. Then you take all the other data and you pump that into a lake. So basically, all the data from our front end systems, how do you get that in an efficient manner into a data lake, and to take a subset of that you can then use for your financial processing, and then get down to your financial solutions. So really, we always look at everything from a data perspective. Most leaders in the industry say, there's the two orders of importance are: number one are people, and two is data. And then applications are really interesting and important, but without the data and having qualified data, without having verified and reconciled data, that causes lots of issues in terms of reconciliation, questions, and doubts. So building that day one into our processes is critical. And this is a process we've built in similar organizations also outside
Yeah.
of before I was at Vantage.
So one of the things you talked about was really trying to take as much kind of out of the box as possible as a building it from the ground up. That gives you kind of an advantage in that when you're scoping out the implementation process, it can help accelerate that. So talk about how did you scope that implementation process? Did you have minimum viable product that you went in first? How long did it take? And what did you learn through that process?
Yeah, so when we looked at it at like three prongs, insurance, reinsurance, and finance. But from an insurance perspective, well, we sat down with the business and really we looked at it from an MVP perspective. What were the most important products to stand up, and how quickly can we do those? So instead of going across, let's just say, four different divisions or business units, which could be 20 different products, we selected, okay, we're going to do one business division. And then for the other ones, we'll create what we'd call more of a simplified financial booking product, right? So we were
Yeah.
able to stand up all the processes that started from submission to quote, bind, book, all the endorsements into our enterprise data warehouse that we could then take an extract and feed to the GL. That entire process took approximately 4 months to stand up, which we were very proud of. And then basically every team we tried to improve that in every implementation that we could do it. And then basically what we did was working with the business, what's the next priority? What's the next priority? And if we needed to build more teams, we'd build more teams, because basically we could run parallel with
Mhm.
everything. And then we had multiple data teams. So it really depended on, we really started with a very large, robust parallel build process. And then as we gained mass and strength in terms of our expansion, we then started slimming that down since we were more of how do we enhance our platforms. And as new units came on, we had those solutions already in place.
So really building that foundation and accelerating that.
Yeah, so there's a whole question about foundation versus innovation, right? And
Yeah.
I would say that building foundationally is innovative because then that allows you're not putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, and you're not creating
Yeah.
islands of interesting technology, but doesn't talk to each other. So once you have a well-founded foundation, then the innovation. Now it's time to build the innovation because the organization is mature enough to figure out where do we need to do, how do we need to look at things, right? And I'm looking from a business perspective across the gamut of underwriting, claims, finance, operations, legal, compliance. So really, as more and more people come on, different questions need to be answered. So
Mhm.
foundation, you're set, and then it's basically, okay, we need to get more data. How do we get more data into these platforms? Or what's the right place to put it in the right level? So then
Yeah.
that's where you build the innovation into it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That foundation is really a catalyst for innovation.
Right.
So let's talk about data and analytics. I know this is one of your big passions and one of the areas that you guys really focus in on. It's always been around and part of strategy of insurers, but it's really evolved here over the last 10 plus years from the days of large EDW projects, where we talked about evolution, and now it's really kind of evolved into a much more rapid approach of being able to bring the data into a data lake house and apply different types of tools. Talk about that evolution and how that fits into where business intelligence and artificial intelligence is today and why it's important to really kind of accelerate that.
So basically, let's talk about the basic data set. So really, you have your basic premise of what I would call a thinner version of an enterprise data warehouse that allows you to do your financial piece. But then the question of in terms of data analytics, what are the questions that we need to look at? What is going to help us make better decisions in the various areas by specific business units? And honestly, it can be some of the things that we've built are very specific to a business unit to answer a particular series of questions to allow them to make better decisions. And then the question is, how do you measure it, right? So you have a
Yeah.
premise, in the data analytics area, you have a theory, a hypothesis. You have to say, okay, we develop the models, we then test those models, working, and our data analytics team does this. This is not a technology group doing this. Our models are built by our data analytics organization. And then that's reviewed with the business through actual data to say, hey, how does this really work? It's either we're ready to go or we would tweak it to go forward. So it's really, in many cases, some of the things that we're doing is really specific to a specific product or a business unit or specific business questions that we're trying to answer. In other cases, it's more portfolio level. So what are those types of things we want to look at across the gambit, which has a much broader stroke. So at that point, you got to say, how are we normalizing our data across it so that we can compare as apples and apples across the board and come up with a portfolio view that can be validated. So that's really where we're at, start to build going forward in Vantage. And then in the AI space, we are dipping our toes in the water as we speak, right? We've looked at things out there in, Microsoft land, which seem promising. We're continuing to monitor that. And there are a lot of great things that are happening out there. But we're looking at specific, small, what I would say, projects to answer specific business questions. How can we get data using AI out of structured and unstructured data to
Mhm.
answer questions that make the business process either in claims or in underwriting, get them the ability to look at data quickly so they don't have to go through 200 documents or 50 documents. So how do we extract that data, show it to them? Then there's other things that you can do. You can put a model against it, score things. And once again, now you start stepping into the data analytics space. So, we are building these as projects right now based on the priority and what we believe the business value of each one of these projects brings.
We now have rapidly evolved over to Gen AI. It's the hottest topic and continues to be in the industry. What are your views on where it's going, and what do you expect in partners like Majesco in leveraging Gen AI?
I think we're still in the early stages, to be honest with you. And I think that speaking to many of my peers in the industry, we're all cautiously optimistic. We think it brings great value in certain areas, but we continue to work and dip our toes, like I say, in it to say what are the specific things that this can actually help us with at this point.
The real use
Uh,
cases.
Right. But we see things like, with Majesco, with the ability potentially in the future where you can say, I need to do an endorsement and you tell it what to do, and basically it does it for you. So it eliminates a lot of keystrokes. There are capabilities, or can I find this and it easily be able to find it? So, these types of what I would call co-pilots, which it seems like a lot of people are calling them, provide a lot of potential capabilities that I think could be leveraged in the future for both many of our users within Vantage, as well as potentially leveraging it for brokerage communities.
As we kind of wrap this up here, let's talk about leadership, because underlying throughout this whole conversation, Jim, is really, in essence, leadership in trying to define strategy and executing on that, guiding people, creating that culture that you want to be able to get the best out of people. How did you get the most out of your team and out of your partners like your SIs or your technology partners like us? And what's your view on not being afraid to fail, and how do you leverage that so that failing is actually a good thing when you use it to kind of apply going forward? And what advice would you give to other CIOs?
It's really about, I mentioned those three aspects, right? The
Yep.
empowerment, the transparency, and the can-do attitude. But I view that myself, as well as the leaders, my peers, as well as the leaders within the organization and my organization, job is to build self-reliant, highly performant teams and measure the teams. And I sit down with all the teams every week, go through what's going on, what's their sprint data, how are we performing, and really celebrating what we're doing well as where we can improve and seeing how we can improve. So we do there is that adage of fail fast, and we do look at that, but you can't fail fast a lot because then you're not getting a lot done. So really it's about, you need to be able to build highly performant teams and allow them to operate independently and be able to provide updates and thoughts, because what I or other leaders think are the right things, they may have difference of opinions, and it may be one of the best things we've ever heard, and we'd want to test that and then pass it on to other teams. So that's how Vantage operates. That's how previous organizations I was in operated in. And I think, and when you talk about a team is the vendor, i.e. could be Majesco in this case. It could be the SI, it will be an SI, and it will be Vantage. So it's a triad, right? One wins, we all win, right? It's not an us versus them, because then nothing's ever going to happen. So the team is really everyone. So how do you constantly communicate and partner with each other? And where you see risk, issues, or concerns, how do you get out in front of that in a very calm and cool manner, right? And address it and working with the team. It isn't about pointing fingers. It's about, okay, these things happen. This is technology. How do we work together to resolve it? Sometimes when you work through those items or those issues or those concerns, those are where the light bulb on the team turns on and they become supercharged, because now they feel there's trust from the leaders. They feel that they can really, really work at a very highly performant level and deliver.
I really like that triad view, because there's another subtle thing that you've been saying all the way through here. It's about partners. It's not about vendors. There's a cultural difference between thinking of somebody as a vendor versus thinking of somebody as a partner. And this triad that you talked about can be such a powerful piece of momentum for change and for execution within an organization, because the culture is so different versus maybe, oh, they're just a vendor, I'll tell them what to do type of thing, rather than being a part of the solution, so to speak,
And there'll be times where the vendor, right, or
Yep.
the SI will hear something that they may not want to hear from the client or the customer, and vice versa. But the question goes, okay, is there a way we can meet in the middle, or is there a better, I never thought about that. That's a great idea. Or so it's once again, it's a partnership. So the us versus them, it's just everyone's going to lose at the end.
Yep.
It's really got to be a partnership and working together to figure out creative ways to define and expand on solutions.
So I really like to end each podcast, Jim, with this same question for everybody. If you could use one word or phrase to describe the future of insurance, what would it be and why, Jim?
I would say it's going to be limitless, because
I love it.
What we're trying to do in the insurance industry, which a lot of people think is not sexy and glorious, First of all, there's always new products that are be coming out, which are very interesting. New capabilities are coming out. But how do we use technology to eliminate the old dungeon of paper and processes and be able to make better decisions going forward? It doesn't matter if it's small. I think some of the personal lines have done a heck of a lot better than the large commercial P&C carriers, which is really what my experience is for the last 25 years. So it's really, how do we push the realm of really becoming highly efficient at getting at data and making decisions and being able to see risk across all our lines or on a common level?
I love that because if we're able to do that, we're able to really kind of deliver on what our customers really need to be able to be protected. And in these days, with cats and higher increases of reinsurance and insurance and everything, it becomes a challenge for some customers.
Absolutely. You look at cat, you look at cyber, you look
Mhm.
at just in the cat space, wind, flood, wildfire. These are all things that are changing the landscape, that are going out
Yep.
there. How do we have better models, better technology? It's truly fascinating what's going on out there.
It's amazing, actually. Well, Jim, as always, I love having a conversation with you, and I think your insights are going to be great for others who are exploring new startups or even just starting a transformation project on its own. We appreciate the partnership that we have, and you are really paving ways for your employees to really do some awesome things.
Well, Denise, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed our conversation and look forward to our continued partnership.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of Future of Insurance Industry Leaders podcast. Subscribe to our market leading podcast series available wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you for listening and be sure to tune in the next time.